Welcome everyone. I'm Troy Lambert. I'm a board member for the Idaho Writers Guild, and we're here today with C.R. Rowenson, otherwise known as Clark. He is the magic guy. He has a super cool magic system blueprint that works for beyond magic. It works for tons of different genres as far as world building and building just the way things work in your world. And I think he's got a fantastic presentation for us. So I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself. And then whenever you're ready to, just start sharing your screen and sharing your presentation. And at the end, if some more people jump into this conversation, we'll have some time for some Q&A and things like that. But
yeah,
we'll go ahead and get rolling.
Absolutely. So thank you for that intro, Troy. I'm going to talk a little bit more about me in just a minute, which that was a great intro. This presentation isn't about the blueprint, though. There is actually some really good content for that you can find on YouTube. Like I talked about the blueprint. There's a recording for me presenting at 20 books to 50K. If you want more information about that, you can always reach out to me. And there's information about my YouTube channel and whatnot at the end of this. But this presentation is going to be all about making your magic matter to your story. And before we get into the nuts and bolts of that, I am going to, well, first I got to make sure I have, there we go. I'm going to let you know who I am. And I mean, you can choose whether you want to trust me or not, but I'm C.R. Rowenson, also known as the Magic Engineer. I am an award-winning author. I am also a writing coach. I do web articles and videos about building magic systems because I'm generally just a magic system nut job. I love everything about writing and story structure, especially, but magic is just that extra special piece that I love dealing with and I can't live without in my stories. Now, to walk through how to make your magic matter, the most important question is, why does it need to matter, right? We're going to spend like the next hour working through concepts and ways to apply the magic. So it's important to your story. Why are we doing all of that? Oh, also, if we have time at the very end, I have a 10 to 15 minute exercise that I like to run through, but that's going to kind of depend on where we're at by the end. But anyway, so why does your magic need to matter? Well, to answer that, we need to answer yet another question, which is, what exactly is magic? Because as Troy mentioned in the beginning, I think magic is more than just sword and sorcery type stuff that we think of. It's more than just superpowers. It encompasses so much. When we are writing and telling our stories, magic is anything enabling effects, is anything enabling effects or abilities beyond our capability or understanding. Now, the hour in that quote can shift, but for the most part, it's us and like us as the creator or the reader and our understanding of the world. So with that covers a lot. It includes advanced technology, it includes forgotten technology, magical technology, bizarre aliens, creature features, environmental effects, planar phenomenon, astral phenomenon. Basically, magic is all of the fantastic elements we put in our stories. Magic, in my opinion, because I guess I have an expanded sense of grandeur or whatever, magic is what makes our fiction fantastical. Magic is what makes it our genres of fiction rather than just contemporary nonfiction or contemporary fiction. This is what is special about sci-fi and a lot of horror, and I love it. So it is in what most of us deal with, whether it's paranormal romance, military sci-fi, any of that. We've got the magic in there, and while it's in there, magic can do so much for us. And it's because of all of these things that magic can do that we really want to make sure it matters. So magic that matters can make our stories and worlds truly unique. It can also take ephemeral concepts and just vague notions and turn them into things that are visceral and tangible and tactile for both the characters and your audience. And more than that, magic systems are what creates that draw, that pull that we all feel when we find a world and a story that we're really, really into. It's what pulls people in. And again, I get, may sound like I'm omnifocused. I kind of am, but magic systems can deliver everything we want from for our audience and from our audience. It can it can make them it makes them more engaged. It can make them feel emotions. It can help them feel odd sensations. It generates interest. It develops investment in the story itself. And it's what can pull that really deep, forge that really deep connection that leads to super fans for their entire lives. I mean, magic is why we want to walk through the forests of Endor from the Star Wars universe, or why we want to fly through the skies besides Iron Man, or even train with a warrior from the Fire Nation and Avatar: The Last Airbender, or just leap between buildings as we train in our allomancy with other Mistborn. It, okay, and I always start these I always start these presentations trying to be slow and measured, and then as I get more excited, I just get going. So I will try and draw back on occasion, but magic can do so much. It can do all of this if we do it correctly, if we make the magic matter. Have I hammered that point home hard enough? I'm gonna do it a little more, because when it is done right, you get things like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where the magic is essential to the individual characters, not just what they can do. It is a huge part of who they are, the struggles that they have to deal with, how they grow as a person, how they're able to interact with the world and overcome problems. And on top of that, even when you look past just individual heroes and individual villains, the magic of this universe is self-propagating, not in sense it propagates more magic, but it propagates more story endlessly. There's always new things that can be explored or developed, or consequences from this magic that is properly integrated into the world. Another example that I really like, and is going to come up later, is The Babadook, which is a horror movie about, on the high level, it's about a grieving widow who is not handling it well, and is resorting to unhealthy modes of grief that are starting to take over her life, and potentially leading to her doing things that she cannot come back from. And that grief, that sense of loss and helplessness and just being trapped, all gets captured and personified in the Babadook, in the monster that is in this movie. And this is one you never, this, I love this as an example, because the Babadook is one of the best metaphors for grief and mental illness I have seen in a movie. Second, probably on the level with It Follows, which is more about like societal shame and stuff like that. But it matters so deeply to what these characters are experiencing, and it lets you as an audience member feel some of that loss and just entrapment that can come from these situations. And it's fantastically done, and it's creepy as hell. So if you don't like horror, maybe not, but it's fantastic. Now, if we do it wrong, that's where you can end up with things like Heroes. Now, Heroes was an immensely popular series. Lots of people liked it. And anytime I talk about something that I don't like, emphasis on I mean, I did not like it. It wasn't for me. And that was a big part of it for Heroes, is right from the beginning, the magic didn't matter. It was there. It felt more like flavor text. All of the drama, all of the character interactions and misunderstandings that even remotely involve the magic easily could have been erased and replaced with much more mundane things. In fact, to me, it felt like they wrote a mundane drama and then just kind of shoved magic into it where they thought it would fit. I didn't make it past season 1 because of that. There's like 7 seasons. So it didn't work for me. The other one, Suicide Squad, specifically the first one. I think they said there was a remake that's supposedly all right. This first one was very damaging to me, so I haven't taken that chance. The magic didn't matter to the story. It didn't match up to the plot. If you haven't seen this one, basically there's a supervillain called the Enchantress who kind of cuts loose and is doing something along the lines of ripping a hole between dimensions. It's not entirely clear what she's doing, but she is this immensely, unimaginably powerful magical being who is threatening reality. And they send in a guy with a gun, a girl with a bat, and a dude with a boomerang. And it doesn't match up. Now that could have made for an incredibly compelling story of an intense underdog situation of these people who are outclassed in every single way imaginable, but that's not the story that they chose to tell. So then what the story they told and the conflict they presented and the magic that was involved didn't line up. It didn't connect with each other. It didn't matter in the right ways. And I've only watched it once, and so that's what can happen if it doesn't matter. Now, this is a lot of stuff I've been talking about, and I'm hopefully helping you understand the importance of all of this. Seriously, don't panic. We're writers. It's a learning process, but we got this. And this is where we're going to start digging into actually how we're going to make this matter. And breathe, because I'm just going full speed. All right. Now, we want to end up with the good example, not the bad example, right? Oh, and I see there's some chat stuff. I will try and answer those when we get to the end, but do go ahead and drop questions in there. And if we have time, we'll go through what we can. Now, the way to make your magic matter is you want it to trigger emotions, and you want it to connect your story to the world around it, and you want the magic to be integrated with everything, as much of the rest of your story as you can. And that's all about alignment. We're building this intricate machine with lots of moving pieces, lots of gears and drive shafts, and you want to make sure that they're meshing together properly, not grinding against each other. Or if they are grinding against each other, it's deliberate. They don't always have to be moving in the same direction. But if there's friction and fracture, and you want it to be intentional. And so we want it to align the way we want it to. And the way we do that is by taking a deeper look at how the magic can factor into the other elements of our story. And when I'm talking about the other elements, I'm of course talking about character, plot, theme setting, and our genre elements. Which, just as a side plug, even if you don't listen to Writing Excuses at all, I highly suggest season 11. It's one of my favorites, where they talk about elemental genres. Changed how I think about genres and how I kind of act as a chef to sprinkle the stuff I want throughout my stories. That's what genre elements are. It's those pieces that indicate you're dealing with a specific genre. So we need it to connect. We want it to connect to these different pieces, because the more we connect it, the more integrated it will be. And it will also actually strengthen those individual elements, because it's seldom one thing that turns you off from a book or a series, but it can be a host of one-dimensional characters. It can be an overly simplistic plot. It can be any number of things. And by working on integrating these things together, it actually strengthens them all at once. So in terms of how the magic can factor into these different parts of your story, well, the magic can act as a positive factor, where it is appearing and being and existing as a resource, a tool, or a solution for that element in question. And we'll get into what that means a little later. So like, it would be a solution within the plot, or a tool for a specific character, or a resource you as the writer are using to demonstrate your theme. So that is a positive factor. It can also be a negative factor where the magic is a problem or an obstacle or a pain point for any of the elements in question. And as you're building it in and setting it up to be positive or negative, these kinds of connections will often trigger emotions in the readers. So when you use it, for example, if you build the magic to be a tool for your characters, a tool for solving problems, then when your characters use it to solve problems, that is how you can get those really satisfying, almost stand up and cheer moments as something snaps into place and they use the right spell, they use the right ability, and then just everything shifts. On the opposite, that can be a moment of sheer panic where you think you have everything right, and then something about the magic comes into play or becomes clear, and you're not about to win, you're about to die horribly. It can also be a big part of what drives some of the tragedy is there may be a hidden cost that you didn't know about until now, and because somebody had been keeping it secret, they knew, and that was part of their sacrifice, and that can just that can really draw on emotions, and I love it. So the other two main ways that the magic can really factor into the different elements is it can be an analogous factor where your magic is serving as a metaphor or a manifestation of a concept or idea. For example, the character's development and understanding and control over their magic can basically their arc with using the magic can be a direct parallel to their internal character arc, which this you now have a metaphorical and in some ways a tangible manifestation of their own growth and adjustment. You can do the same thing with your theme, with your setting. This is just, it's representation. Then you have it, you can use it as a driving factor where the magic is making things happen. It is the main reason or the inciting incident behind an element. It's what's pushing it in a specific direction. It doesn't have to be forward, it can be backwards. And just like analogous, it doesn't have to be a direct metaphor. It can be a parallel or a counterexample, but you're using it as some kind of analogy to teach. And with the driving factor, you are using the magic in some fashion to push this element in a certain direction. And when you do that, those kinds of connections can be very powerful and are some of the easier ways to connect it to the world. Because if you use the magic as a driving factor in like your theme or your plot, it makes it easier for those are situations where the reader can start to see parallels between what is driving things in their world and in their lives. And same thing with metaphors, right? If I can see how the Babadook is a metaphor for this woman's grief, then it's not too big a jump for me to also see how this Babadook is a metaphor for my depression or my anxiety. Now, that's not how they used it in the movie, but it makes it so that I can connect it to the real things that I am experiencing. So normally this is where, if I was live, I try and stop and ask questions, and also where I would be looking around to see if there are any blank expressions. So I hope this is making sense. If not, we will come back to it. You guys are getting the modified version. I've given this once before, and the first time there seemed to be stuff missing in the explanation. So I'm hoping this is clicking a little better. So now I want to walk through how the magic can connect with these specific pieces of our story, starting with the magic and the characters. So going back real quick, I have these little icons that I use here for the 4, right? Those are going to show up again and again as we go through these examples, because your magic system doesn't need to factor in all 4 ways for every element. It doesn't even have to factor in with every element. This is where you can really get creative and decide how integrated and how present you want it to be. There is such a thing as too much of a good thing. So you may not want it everywhere, but you want to make sure that it's at least somewhere. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and start looking at some of these examples. First one I always like to go over is the Confessors from the Sword of Truth series. If you haven't read the series, the Confessors have a very specific magical talent. And it sounds cheesy, it is the power of love, but not just like toned down love. No, this is crazy, obsessive, mind wiping love, where when they're called confessors, because once they unleash their power on you, your entire being is dedicated and overwhelmed by your love for this person. So why would you ever lie? They are not lie detectors so much as lie extractors, but this is permanent. It does permanent damage to the person and makes them a little psycho crazy and willing to do pretty much anything for the confessor, which means that in this case, the magic can act both as a positive and a negative factor. It's a positive factor. It's a very useful tool. It's also a very positive thing in one sense, and plays into some very interesting character relationships throughout the story. But you can also see how it's negative. That's a real problem. There's also some other limitations of, because there's so much power involved, they can't use it frequently. Like they're drained for a while before they can use it again. So, there's strategic limits on that. Also, there's moral limits, because you don't just want to use it just so that you can get a free bed at an inn, like, because you have just destroyed this person's life. So very powerful tool, but very, very potent downsides and some very big obstacles that come along with that. Babadook, I talked about a little bit, right? It's a negative factor. It is a obstacle that is messing with this woman and her child's life. It is a representation of their inability to move forward into healthy recovery. It starts tearing their lives apart, damaging their mental stability. As with most monster stories and horror stories, it's also the thing that is driving things forward. She starts in a bad place, and it's because of the interactions and learning to deal with the Babadook that she gets through to the end. The Babadook is what makes things happen. It's also metaphor, as I have already belabored heavily. Then you have Harry Potter, specifically the Boggarts, which, if you haven't read the books, totally fine. The Boggart is a creature that feeds on fear, and it is a shapeshifter transformer that it always appears as the person's greatest fear in order to induce the fear. It's also, I think, if I remember right, I think it's also a self-defense mechanism. I think it's a little bit of both. Maybe it's just self-defense. I don't know. But she uses it. They use it really well in the story, specifically when it appears in front of Lupin. We don't realize it at the time, but it is, well, actually for everybody, it's acting as a metaphor for their own internal struggles and their own internal fears. It is a very tangible metaphor for that aspect of the characters. All right. Magic and Plot. I am actually just gonna pop the chat open. Okay. We'll come back to those questions a little later. I wanted to make sure there wasn't anything along the lines of, I don't understand what the hell you're saying. So Magic and Plot. Come on now. Boggarts again. Once again, it's analogous. It's metaphorical. It is, we don't know it when we see it, but the Boggart appearing as the moon, we later learn, is Lupin's biggest fear because he's a werewolf. And that is a drop indicating future danger that is coming. And it's something that plays out very well throughout the story. So it's an analogy for it's foreshadowing that you really don't pick up and really would have been more difficult to provide without a mechanism like this. Or Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. If you don't know this one, I don't want to say shame on you, but I am surprised, where children find a magical wardrobe that lets them escape/enter into the magical land of Narnia. Without the wardrobe, they would just be kids running around a mansion during the middle of World War I. It wouldn't have gone any further. It's like the magic is how they move forward. It is what pushes them forward, because Lucy hides in the closet and then just ends up in Narnia, and that's what pushes things forward. It is the inciting incident for the entire first book. Mistborn. It is so in the first Mistborn book, the overall plot is that a band of thieves are setting out on the line is like they're setting out on the biggest heist ever, which is to steal the empire from the Lord Ruler. It's not quite right. They're actually seeking to dethrone and kill the Lord Ruler, and that's the plot. The magic in this case is both a tool and an obstacle at several points throughout the story. It's a tool because the main characters, the main POV characters we follow, are both Mistborn, and they use the magic to get places, to solve problems, to be spies, to fight. It's something they learn how to use, and they wield it like a blade. It's also an obstacle because the Lord Ruler also has these powers and some things that they don't know and don't understand. And overcoming his abilities, learning how they work, dealing with his minions, which are the Steel Inquisitors, which are super cool and super gross, and I love it. They're a big obstacle, which again only exists because of the magic. And then there's also nuances of the magic that, like I said, they don't understand and they have to stumble around. It's a stumbling block. All right, magic and setting. This next one is actually two together because they function the same, and that is both Star Trek and Stargate. In this case, the magic is the technology. Just gonna put that there. And in both cases, without the technology, one, you wouldn't have the setting that you have. These are both, one is kind of contemporary leading into epic sci-fi, and one is just straight up epic sci-fi. If you didn't have faster than light travel, spaceships, ray guns, alien races, and all of that kind of stuff, you wouldn't have this setting. Those don't exist as they are without the magic. And a little more on that, there's Fern Gully, which it's tied to a lot of deforestation and environmental stuff, but basically a guy is a contractor who is plowing down forests in a region, and through some magic he gets shrunk down to the size of the fairies that live there and ends up going on this adventure to fight this this sentient form of corruption and pollution that gets set loose. And again, without the magic, that setting couldn't really be. It's a driving force behind what makes that setting interesting. It's also incredibly metaphorical, both in terms of our connection to nature, how nature interacts with itself, and the impact of pollution, which does get into some thematic elements. But just in terms of the direction and how the setting is moving and what that setting means to us, deeply connected to the magic. And then when it comes to theme and genre, going back to Fern Gully, because I already talked about that a lot, right? Dealing with pollution and the themes of deforestation and human interaction all gets covered here. I mean, like I said, the big bad is a manifestation of pollution that is killing and corrupting the forest. Like, it's a kid's movie, so very on point with the theme, and just in terms of the fantasy genre overall, again, it's pushing all of those forward and making them move the way that we need them to. Underworld. I could have also put this in setting. Underworld is classic urban fantasy. And in fact, it's probably my first real introduction to urban fantasy when I was in high school. It's it's werewolves and vampires beating the crap out of each other in awesome battles as they struggle in this gritty, grimy, always raining city to figure out what's going on and overcome the conflict. Without the magic, you don't have the urban fantasy setting. You don't have the urban fantasy genre elements because they are dependent on these magical creatures. And you don't have these themes that are built in there about internal schisms, tribalism, and, you know, kind of mending the breach and becoming a bridge between cultures. Like, that's me reaching a little bit because it really is just about vampires and werewolves beating the crap out of each other and it's awesome. But still, I think you get my point. Now going back to Harry Potter. Theme and genre. It's about, so much of it is about finding the power in yourself, fitting in, all of those good school themes, academy themes that come through there. The magic pushes all of those forward, brings them to light, and helps shape them. And in many cases acts as the example of what we want to learn and what we want to communicate through the story. All right. Okay, so that was a lot of information. At this point, I do have a writing exercise that would probably be better if we would make more sense if we do it outside of the recording. So right now, I actually want to stop. I'm going to jump ahead, do my outro, and then we'll do questions. And if we have time after that, we can stop the recording and jump back to the exercise. So more about me, you can find me at crrowenson.com. You can also find me on YouTube as The Magic Engineer. I do offer coaching and developmental editing services. You can find more about that at the link there. And I have a book, multiple books, but this one is a workbook specifically to help you find out where you need limitations and help you construct limitations for your magic system. Currently only available in ebook. You can get, there's 15 exercises. You can get all of the worksheets for free on my website. I try to keep as little behind paywalls as possible. There is also the book that Troy mentioned, which is the Magic System Blueprint, which is a tool that I developed and is designed to help storytellers quickly get a holistic understanding of their magic and how it can fit into their story and their world. Both the ebook and paperback are available on Amazon. Hardbacks are currently only available at events I attend, so do be on the lookout for that. You can get the complete Magic System Blueprint Starter's Guide by joining my newsletter. It includes extra examples and some basic information. Or if you just want the blueprint itself so that you can print it out and work through it, you can get that for free on my website as well. And that is the core of the presentation, which no matter, every time I practice on my own takes closer to an hour, and every time I present it takes closer to 30 minutes. But thank you so much. So whatever you do, get out there, keep writing, and stay awesome. And that is, I guess, scene, and we can jump to questions.
All right. Well, let's open it up to the couple of us that are here if you have any questions. And I'm going to stop the recording at this point, so we don't record the Q&A. So you feel free to just jump out and answer questions. I think most of the chat was just us chatting.
Okay.
And then, so if you want to drop your screen.